Welcome, one and all. Super Wednesdays here in the Holy Land, in the Holy Apple. We're on a special date of the year, 15th day of the first month of Adar 5779. Of course, it's called Shushan Purim Katan, or the small miniature Purim, or it's called the first Purim, as opposed to the second one coming up in a month. Very joyous day to one and all our blessings here. Okay, now we are part 2 here on the state of Israel, a repeat of the tribe of Ephraim sin, question mark. Last week, I don't want to go over what we did because I'm trying to keep this literally as condensed as I can. Will we be able to finish it today in our second part? I really don't know. You know, this is the first time I'm doing the class. There's so much material, and even though I'm saying a fraction of the material that's on this subject, we might have to go 2 more, second part today and third part next week, because we still, in order to be truthful and to be on the mark, we have to have everything down, and there's certain areas that we cannot skip over, even though I'm cutting out, believe me, I'm cutting out a lot of information. This past week I got a phone call from a listener to this class, and it happens to this class happens to this week correspond to the passing of her dear mother. Her name is, so this class, besides for trying to coming closer to God and doing the will of God, which of course that's our first goal here, with the words of the Torah here and the lessons that we hopefully, God willing, will learn, this should be an elevation for the soul of Shoshana Sheila, the daughter of Meir. Okay, so let's take it right now. Please feel free, go through the first class. I'm going to pretty much stay away from anything that was in the first class. So here we go. We saw that calculations of redemption is a very, very problematic idea. We saw, for example, in Egypt, even though God told Abraham 400 years, there are so many possibilities when that 400-year period is over, because when do you exactly start the 400 years? We saw 6 various options which are included in the verse from the Torah in Genesis 15. So even in Egypt, it's very, very difficult to find the calculations. The greatest of the greats, even Moses, was off. We saw in Babylonia, the Talmud tells us in Megillah 11b and 12a, we saw that there were numerous calculations within the kingdom of Babylonia. Today would be Iraq or Iran. We know that there was the dynasty of the family of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar ruled, and then his son Avil Merodach, he was second, and then the grandson Belshazzar, he was the last ruler of Babylonia, and then they were defeated. They were defeated by Madai. So we see that and also Daniel, all these had calculations, and the king of Persia, Achashverosh, they all made calculations. When do we start the 70-year punishment that God had promised via the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu? Where do we start the 70 years? So each figure started the 70 years from a different period. Some started it from the rise of the first king of Babylonia, which was Nebuchadnezzar. Some started the counting from the downfall of Joachim. Some started it from the first exile, which was the exile of Joachim, or otherwise known as the exile of Yechoniah. We started from, that was the first wave. Some started from the destruction of the temple. So there are so many possibilities here, and the greatest of greats to the lowest of lows, you know, Daniel being the greatest of great and the other kings being the lowest of lows, they were all off. And we have, last but not least, Daniel in the last 2 verses of his book tells us the secret. I mean, like, don't pass this on to anybody. We don't want to pass this information on. But he says there that the final redemption will come in the year, it will come in 1,335 years. Wow. We got, you know, we hit the jackpot here. Now we know when the redemption is coming. Yeah. The problem is that there have been hundreds, perhaps thousands of sages that tried to calculate and were off, because the question once again comes down to the same idea. Where do we start the 1,335 years? Of course the number is true. The 400 number is true in Egypt. The 70 number is true in, you know, the exile of Babylonia. Also in our times, the number is true. The problem is, how do we calculate? Where do we start from? So, can we say with a hand on heart that the reason why the tribe of Ephraim was punished and killed was because of the fact that they miscalculated the redemption from Egypt? Can we say that? There are so many possibilities. Moses made a mistake. The Jewish people made a mistake. When Moses came to them and said, it's time to leave, Jewish people said, time out, we're not going anywhere. We got 190 years left here in Egypt. We've only been here 210 years. The exile is 400 years. You know, hit the road, Moses. So, can we say that because of the fact that they miscalculated, that, you know, they suffered this tremendous punishment? We saw how many people, there are many different opinions, how many of the tribe of Ephraim were killed. So this is pretty serious. I mean, I understand the king of Babylonia, when he took out some of the vessels of the holy temple, and showing that the Jewish people were finished, and he had no respect for these holy vessels, I can understand him being punished. But you look at Achashverosh, who also had a party for 6 months, and, you know, nothing happened at that party to Achashverosh. His kingdom was not destroyed. So we will say, no, that cannot be the reason. The miscalculation cannot be the reason. So then, what is the problem? What was the sin? The Yehuda and Balarokeach, these two opinions, commentators, they say that the sin of Ephraim was the fact that they did not take out the bones of Joseph. Joseph gave an oath to the tribes, to the Jewish people, to make sure that when they leave Egypt, they must take out Joseph's bones to be buried in the city, holy city of Shechem, today mistakenly known as Nablus. So therefore, this is an amazing thing. This was, according to the Yehuda and the Rokeach, this was a tremendous grave sin, because of the fact that this was the selling of Joseph, take 2. He was sold by his brothers. Now these are the sons of Joseph, not only brothers. This is a much closer relationship here. And they sold him down the drain. So take 2 on that, selling Joseph down the drain. And we paid a high price. Part of the suffering in Egypt is because of the fact that we sold Joseph down the river. So in order to correct this exile, we must make sure not to leave Egypt without the bones. So that was their downfall. Number 2, According to the Nachmanides, the sin of the tribe of Ephraim was that there was an oath that was passed down from generation to generation. It began with Abraham, and now there was an oath and a secret code. The oath was that you shall not leave the exile until you will be contacted. You will be introduced to two redeemers of the Jewish people. That was the first piece of information. And the second was a secret code, certain words, two words, pakod pakadati, I will visit upon you. There were secret words that were passed down from the leaders of generations, starting from Abraham, passed down to Isaac, passed down to Jacob. It goes all the way to the father of Moses, which was Amram. Interesting enough, of course, that Moses did not grow up with his father Amram, so there was no way. God purposely had this arranged so people wouldn't say, well, he grew up in the family of Amram, so therefore he knew this information. It's not like he really knew the code. But here it's an amazing thing. He was totally in a different land for 60 years. He was not in contact with his family, and he knew the secret code. So according to Nachmanides, this was the sin, that there was an oath not to leave Egypt until they meet up with two redeemers, and number two, they are told the secret code. Third opinion is from the Marsha based on the Tractate of Sanhedrin, page 92b. The Marsha says an amazing thing. It can't be that the tribe of Ephraim was punished so harshly, was wiped out because of the fact that they miscalculated. He said that it can't be. There has to be something more concrete here. And what did he find? Found out what was missing here. What oath did they disregard, the tribe of Ephraim? And he tells us an amazing thing. He tells us that there was a covenant, a treaty between Abraham and the king of the Philistines, Avimelech. And there was a treaty that both sides would keep the peace and not attack each other, and that's how it would remain. And this would continue for 3 generations. And there were still descendants of Avimelech that were still alive, and the time had not passed yet. And that's another reason why the Jewish people had to do another 40 years in the desert till that time of the descendants of Avimelech were no longer around. So according to the opinion of the Marsha, this was the reason why they suffered. According to the book Divrei Tova on page 262, he expands a little bit on the idea of the Marsha. It tells us an amazing thing, that if it was not for the fact that the tribe of Ephraim broke the covenant between the Jewish people and the Philistines, and what did they do? They stole the sheep of the Philistines. If it was not for this factor, there's a good chance that they would not have been punished by God. It was only the fact that they broke the treaty. How did they break the treaty? They broke the treaty by taking by force the sheep of the Philistines. So it has nothing to do with an oath, it has to do with the oath, but it's not like the problem of the miscalculation. He's saying here that because of the fact that they broke the treaty by attacking and stealing the flock of the Philistines, this was the reason why they suffered. A fourth opinion why they were punished comes the book of Peninei Yecheskel, page 261. He writes there, very interesting, that the tribe of Ephraim did not performed the circumcision commandment. Amazing thing. We know that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were commanded first, before they were allowed to leave, they were commanded to do the circumcision. We know that during the many years of the Egyptian exile, the Jewish people, except for the tribe of Levi, the Levites, they refrained from performing the circumcision commandment. So it's an amazing concept. We cannot leave. It's such an important thing. It says, in fact, that in so to speak, at the gates of heaven sits Abraham. And even if a person has sinned tremendously, the fact if he has a circumcision, there will be tremendous amount of forgiveness. That person will be allowed in the gates of heaven. Of course, that doesn't exempt him from various punishments, but that does allow him at least to get into the ballpark, to the stadium. An amazing thing. So this is not just like some little, as they say in Yiddish, Narishkeit. This is like not a little simple, minor infraction here. This is a serious idea here. In fact, this is the first commandment of a child, so you know that it's a foundation of Judaism. So the tribe of Ephraim, like other people, they did not, before they left Egypt, they ran away from Egypt, so they, like others, but they didn't leave Egypt, and once they left Egypt, they had to do the circumcision, so that's an amazing thing. That's why they were punished. It has nothing to do with miscalculations of the redemption or of the exile. So we see, in conclusion, dear friends, we see here from the above four ideas that today there is none of these concepts exist today. What we said just now, from the fact that they forgot, they sold Joseph down the river again, and they left without bringing his bones back to the land of Israel. So take two. And from till the idea of they were not circumcised, they left Egypt without a circumcision. How can you do that? How can you be redeemed without the circumcision? So a person receives their soul when they have a circumcision. So this is the redeeming factor of a person. Without that circumcision, a person does not have their soul. So we see that none of this information, none of these transgressions apply today. So our question, is the state of Israel a repeat? So far, we must say, no. Okay. Our next step in our journey. Our next step. Did the tribe of Ephraim, did they sin intentionally, or were they mistaken? So, interesting, the majority of our sages, the majority of the commentators say flat out that it was a mistake. It was not done on purpose. It was not done to spite. Who is the majority opinion? I'll just give a few. We have Nachmanides, we have the Holy Shla, we have the El Shech, we have Rabbi Abarvanel, Yitzchak Abarvanel, we have our sages, Shmot Rabbah 20, chapter 20, paragraph 11. We have the Psikta of Rav Kahana. We have the 11th chapter, the 10th paragraph. We have the tractate of Sanhedrin, page 92. Side B, look in the Rashi commentary. All these say the same idea. There was a mistake here. On the other hand, there are two major opinions that say the opposite. They say that this sin was intentional. This is the Mechilta of the portion of Bishalach at the beginning. This is also Shir Hashirim Rabbah in the 2nd chapter, in the 7th paragraph. So this is a minority opinion that it was done intentionally. Their sin was intentional. Now folks, put on that seatbelt and listen closely. You got to listen closely to all of this. And you got to go over it a couple of times. I know that when I hear a class, I go over 2, 3, 4, 5 times until I really understand it. And this issue that we're talking about, the tribe of Ephraim and they're leaving early, and the state of Israel. This is such a fundamental issue in Judaism. This is a very, very, people like not to think about this, but they should be thinking about this, because this is a life and death issue here. Okay, so we have an interesting concept. It's called time for redemption, our two-edged sword. On one hand, when we're talking about is it time for redemption, this is a very dangerous issue. Why? On one hand, we have a fear that maybe we jumped the gun. On the other hand, we also have a fear, an equal fear. Maybe we missed the train. Ho ho, baby. So we have the double-edged, or the two-edged sword here. Which way do you go? On one hand, we don't want to miss the train, and we want to be redeemed. On the other hand, we do not want to jump the gun, because then you're out if you jump the gun. So we'll see right now that this two-edged sword is extremely, extremely dangerous. And you got to know which team, which side of the fence to be on. Listen to this amazing stuff. It says in the tractate Ketubot, page 111, side A. It talks about there one of the oaths. There in the tractate that I just mentioned in Ketubot, there are various opinions. There are opinions that there were 3 oaths. There's an opinion that there were 4 oaths. There's an opinion that there were 6 oaths. So one of the 6 is that the Jewish people are not allowed to delay the redemption. Shelo yirachku et haketz. They should not distance the redemption from themselves, giving up hope, or it's never going to happen, or it's going to happen, and way down in history. On the other hand, Rashi says an interesting thing. On this oath, it says in the Talmud that the Jewish people should not delay. On the other hand, Rashi brings down another nuance that he might have had in the Talmud, that it says a different word. Instead of to put off or delay, it says a person should not hasten the redemption, to speed it up. So it's an amazing thing. Within the commentary, the leading commentary, Rashi, we have here, within one of the oaths, we have here this exact conflict. What are we going to do here? Are we in danger of hastening, jumping the gun, or are we in danger of pushing it off, of delaying it, and then we're in trouble? Either way you slice it. In an amazing piece, folks. An amazing piece. Amazing piece here. It says in the book, the Magid Mishneh, from the author, from the Jewish law authority of Rabbi Menashe Klein. He has 18 volumes of Jewish law called Mishneh Halachot. He also has a commentary on the Torah. And he writes on pages 245 and 246, he writes amazing concepts here. Says the following. He says, those evil, those devils, the bad guys, Datan and Aviram, God allowed us the tremendous kindness that He gave us, that we were able to do a class on who really these two arch enemies, these two devils that we think about who were they really. But anyways, Rabbi Menashe Klein, in his commentary, comes up with an unbelievable commentary. Folks, hold on tight. He says the following. You know these two people, Datan and Aviram? They were the thorns in Moses' side. From the time that Moses comes back, from the time that Moses goes out, for the first time he leaves the palace, so to speak, and he goes to see what's up with the Jewish people. And then he sees an Egyptian taskmaster, slave driver. He sees him beating up on a Jew, and then he goes out and he just wipes out this Egyptian. From that time until the end, when we're in the desert years, dozens of years later, we see the same thorns in Moses' side, whether it was at the Reed Sea, crossing over, who was yelling, let's go back to Egypt, let's go back to Egypt, or if it was in the desert, who was saying, why did you bring us out to kill us here? It was the same thorns in Moses' side, Datan v'Aviram. What was the problem? What was their case? What's going on over here? We said any person that you see in the Torah is not your average wicked person. Don't think they were on extremely very, very high level. These people were giants. These people had the potential to be super righteous. They're not simple people. They're not like us. So he says an unbelievable line. That from the start, when Moses appears on the scene, and they see what he's doing, they say very simple. They know the Jewish law. They say, we have a law. The law is that we are not allowed to revolt against the nations of the world. And in our case, we're in Egypt and we're slaves, and this is part of a punishment that God had promised would come down to Abraham. So therefore we are not allowed to revolt or rebel against the Egyptians. And this character Moses, he's coming and he is rebelling against the nations of the world. We have to take our punishment and take it with a grain of salt and take it gracefully and keep our mouths shut. And here this guy, he's coming up, he's endangering the Jewish people, he's killing Egyptians, he's going to endanger the entire Jewish people. They, in essence, they decided a Jewish law that Moses was what we call a rodef, which means a person that is endangering the Jewish people here. And more so, more to the point, not only is he endangering the Jewish people, his whole ideas later on, when he came back after 60 years of being in exile, because of these two guys, Datan and Aviram, when he comes and he says now he's coming to redeem the Jewish people, they said to the Jewish people, they said, in fact, Rav Klein, he says an amazing line. Remember what you were taught in like first grade? When Moses originally appears to the wise men, to the 70 elders of the generation, the top-notch rabbis, and he says, you know, I've come to redeem the Jewish people, and he tells them the secret codes or whatever. And then he says, okay, let's go now to Pharaoh. Very good. Well, he starts going, and you know the song by Simon and Garfunkel, there must be 50 ways to leave your lover, so there must be 50 ways to sneak out the back, slip out the back, Jack, make a new plan, Stan. Gotta be coy, Roy, or don't need to be coy, Roy. Just get yourself free. Well, anyways, that song, that was really happening. Why? Because as Moses and Aaron were going forward towards the palace, one by one, they were slipping out the back, Jack. The 70 elders. I would sing the song, but we don't have time. So the 70 elders, they snuck, and by the time that Moses arrives at the palace with Aaron, would you believe how many people are left of the 70? You got it, a big zero. It's only Moses and Aaron left. Why did they leave? Because according to Rabbi Klein, an amazing line, that Datan and Aviram, they were successful in convincing the elders, okay, convincing the top rabbis of the generation. They were able to convince them that this was not the proper time of redemption. According to their calculations of Datan ve'Aviram, Moses was hastening the redemption, and that is something which is very dangerous. Why? Because we see when the tribe of Ephraim apparently hastened the redemption, they were wiped out. They were wiped off the map. So therefore, these are actually, according to this, an amazing understanding and getting out of the box what we were taught in kindergarten, how these guys were, we love to joke about them, and these two wicked, Datan ve'Aviram, these guys are serious. They had a lot of clout. They had a tremendous argument here. And they were convincing the Jewish people and the leaders of the Jewish people that we have not completed the 400 years. And therefore, do not believe in Moses. Now this continued not only during the Egyptian exodus, but even after they left, they continued. When they saw bad things happening to the Jewish people, when they saw various punishments and suffering of the Jewish people in the desert, they said, you know why? This is because of the fact that we're being punished because of the fact that the 400 years are not up yet. And Moses hastened our redemption. It wasn't time, and therefore that's why we're getting wiped out over here. Amazing idea over here. He goes on further, Rabbi Klein. You know the 80%? Remember that class we had about the 80%? Why don't we have a Holocaust memorial for them, a remembrance, a memorial day for them? Remember them? The 80% that didn't leave Egypt? What was their reason? Was it just because of the fact that it was the good life? Well, there are opinions that it was because of the good life that would be returned to them, or some of them were already living the good life. It had already been a year since they were suffering in Egypt. As we know, the Talmud tells us that the amount of time that the Egyptians were punished by the 10 plagues was a 1-year period. So it had been quite some time where the Jewish people were not suffering, and actually they were doing pretty well. However, according to Rav Klein, he says Rabbi Klein, amazing idea over here, that the idea was also with them that it was not the proper time. When Moses left, we know he left 190 years before 400 years were up in Egypt. 400 years were up from the time of Isaac, that's true. But they looked at it in a different fashion. They said we have to be in Egypt 400 years, we got 190 to go. We ain't going anywhere. So that was there. It wasn't like so simple as we think, that they were just a bunch of lowlifes, bunch of people that wanted the good life, and not such a simple issue. So this is an amazing idea that Rabbi Klein points out to us. So that's one part of the equation. This is one part of the double-edged sword, that too early, okay, that to hasten, that's problematic. On the other hand, what happens if we delay? What happens if we hang around too long in the exile? Listen to this amazing stuff. It says in Tractate Yoma, page 9, side B. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Lakish, famous Reish Lakish, who was once, when he was young, he was a famous bandit, thief. He was swimming in the Jordan River. Then a sage, another sage, named Rabbi, the son of Chana, he came by and offered, Rabbi Rabbah offered a hand to Reish Lakish to help him out of the Jordan River. Anybody that has once done any swimming in the Jordan River, there are many parts that are not easy to get out of. You know, it's like you have to go to a part where you'll be able to get in and get out, because if you just jump in, there are a majority of the Jordan River, you can't get out of there. So he gave him a hand, and listen to this response. It's not exactly, you know, hey, how you doing? Thank you very much. Not very polite. Listen to what Reish Lakish, was swimming in the Jordan River, says. He says, I vow. He says a promise. He says an oath. I promise that God hates you. What do you mean? Whoa. This guy's one of our sages. One of our top scholars. What did he mean? Who does he hate? It means, right, Rashi, the commentator, holy commentator, he says that God hates all the people, all the inhabitants of Babylonia that did not come with Ezra in the time of the rebuilding of the Second Temple, and therefore, because of the fact that they did not return in mass, only 42,000 returned, the majority, overwhelming majority of the Jews decided to hang out and keep on going, keep on trucking in Babylonia. And because of this, the divine presence did not return in full force, or according to other opinions, as we'll see, the Second Temple would not have been destroyed if the Jewish people would have returned in mass. Amazing thing. So Reish Lakish brings down a verse in the Song of Songs by King Solomon, and he says the following, that if you would have gone up to the land of Israel from Babylonia, if you would have left Babylonia and come in mass, and come with strength, in numbers, back to the land of Israel, then you have been likened to silver, that silver is special, real silver is special, that it cannot be, cannot rot. Silver does not rot. However, because of the fact that only a few went up to the land of Israel and left Babylonia, you've been likened to a tree, to a cedar tree that we know with wood, they definitely could rot. Wood does rot. So we see an interesting meeting between a sage that was in the land of Israel, meeting with a sage that had come from Babylonia to the land of Israel, and a very big confrontation between the two of them. Another example. So we see the two-edged sword here. Listen to what's going on over here. How many people did not feel like the time was correct? We talked about how many opinions that we saw when it came to the 70 years. When does that 70-year period start? So we can understand why many refused to come back to the land of Israel. Perhaps that they had jumped the gun. So here we see the fact that the Jewish people tarried and did not hasten coming back to the land of Israel. They caused a tremendous punishment to the Jewish nation. Tremendous thing. So here, if you go over a little bit to the left, you got to be careful. You might get, you might get stabbed. If you go over to the right, also have to be careful here. Listen to this. We have in Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs Rabbah, chapter 8, paragraph 10, an amazing story here. He says an amazing thing. Our sages tell us that when the king of Cyprus, Koresh, when he made a proclamation that the Jewish people could return and rebuild the temple, only a few Jews went. And it says here's the following, that if the Jews would have gone up in mass after the proclamation of Cyrus, then the second temple would not have been destroyed. An amazing thing. Second temple, we would have it today. This would have been the final temple. This would have been the final redemption. Listen to this. Rabbi Zerah, he went to a marketplace in the land of Israel, and he went up to one of the merchants, and he had to weigh something. He bought something that needed to be weighed, and he said, you know, we have a commandment in the Torah that when a person weighs, when you go to a store and there's a weighing process that takes place, a person has to be very, very careful to make sure that he does it honestly and not, God forbid, make a mistake and take too much money because you made a mistake how much the product weighs. So he warns the person, Rabbi Zerah warns this merchant, that make sure that when you are weighing this item, you weigh it very, very well in order not to transgress this commandment. And all of a sudden, unexpectedly, this merchant, you know, he's a simple guy, one of these guys that work in the marketplace, you know, that shekel, watermelon for a shekel, you know, those guys that are yelling all day. So he turns to Rabbi, you know, a scholar, a sage, and he says, what are you telling me to be meticulous when it comes to weighing? Look who's talking. You people, your descendants from Babylonia. Okay? Rabbi Zerah lived in Babylonia and only later came to the land of Israel. Moved to the land of Israel. Your descendants, your family, your grandparents, you brought upon the Jewish people a tremendous destruction. Whoa, those are harsh words. Rabbi Zerah thought to himself, what is this guy talking about? Why, the people of Babylonia are responsible for the destruction of the temple and the punishments that the Jewish people are receiving, and not the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel? That's what he thought. And then he entered the study hall of Rabbi Shila, and he sat there, and amazingly, what's the first lesson that he heard? So Rabbi Zerah, he got really, you know, he got gonged, he really got zonked by this merchant over here that in his face, he's telling him that you people, your descendants in Babylonia, because of the fact that you did not come back after the 70-year period was over, you did not come back with Ezra, the scribe. You brought destruction upon the Jewish people, the destruction of the temple, and that the redemption, the final redemption, would not kick in. And he goes into this study hall, and what does he hear? Oh my God, OMG. He hears this lesson that Rabbi Shiloh is teaching, that if the Jewish people would have gone up to the land of Israel in mass during the time of the Second Temple, then the Second Temple would not have been destroyed. And the final words of Rabbi Zerah was that this simple man, this simple merchant has taught me a great lesson. So folks, an amazing thing, if we hasten, if we miscalculate and we go up, there's a danger. On the other hand, if we keep on sitting and saying it's not time yet, no, not yet, we're waiting for something miraculous, we're waiting for the Messiah, we're waiting for those wings. Very dangerous. Also, got to be exact. Got to know which time of history to go for it or not to go for it. What period of time are we in? You have to know that. Not only that, the same idea is said in the Tractate of Blessings, Brachot, page 4, side B. It says an amazing, we say this every day in our prayers, in the morning prayers, Ad Yavor Amcha Hashem, Ad Yavor Amzukanita. Why does it say until the Jewish people will cross over? It says cross over twice. And it says an amazing lesson, that if the Jewish people would have not sinned when they came back in the time of the Babylonian redemption, if they would have not sinned in the time of Ezra, then they would have been they would have received, they would have merited tremendous miracles like the first redemption from Egypt. Can you imagine that? We're talking about the splitting of the sea. We're talking about the 10 plagues. Amazing. We're talking about being able to survive, staying alive in the desert. We're talking about the manna bread. We're talking about water in the middle of the desert. We're talking about those clouds of glory. Imagine, it would have happened again. So the Marsha says, what was the sin? What sin is the Talmud talking about? That if we would have not sinned in the time of Ezra when we returned to the land of Israel, what sin? And pow! He hits it out of the park. The Marsha hits it out of the park. He says there, you know what sin we're talking about? The sin that the Jewish people did not in mass come and return to the land of Israel. Instead, they decided to remain in the exile of Babylonia. And that's what caused so much destruction and a lack of redemption and a lack of blessing and miracles and the destruction of the temple and the lack of divine presence in the temple, in the second temple that existed. Another final example of this idea of the double-edged sword. You have to be careful on both ends. Don't think, oh, those guys Ephraim, you know, ha 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 ha. It's not such a ha ha ha. It might be on us, ha 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 ha, that we're sticking it out in the exile. It might be the joke is on us. Listen to this. It's written, in the Divrei Chaim on page 19, the Divrei Chaim by Rabbi Chaim Uri Cohen. He writes an amazing idea. He says, you know what? Did you ever ask yourself, when Moses is about to send the spies, out of all the spies, right, there's 12, how come he only gives a blessing to one guy? He gives him to Joshua. Why is that? You know, can you imagine? There's people standing in line for a blessing and the rabbi gives only one person a blessing and everyone else, he says, adios amigos, like hit the road, Jack. People might be insulted over there. So why in the world? This is a great question. Why in the world did, of all the 12 spies, even Kalev, who did not fall, he passed the test along with Joshua, but he was also not blessed. Why of all the spies was Joshua blessed? Now folks, hold on tight over here. An amazing idea that Rabbi Cohen comes up with, the Divrei Chaim. He says the following, open up your hearts. Moses was worried. He knew that the tribe of Ephraim had once fallen because they hastened the exodus from Egypt. So therefore, more than any other tribe, Moses was frightened that the tribe of Ephraim would come up and report to the Jewish people because of the fact that they were punished and they saw the tremendous punishment that their tribe suffered because of the fact that they wanted to come into the land of Israel. Moses was frightened that they would once again, they would say, now we are going to repent, now we will do tshuva, and now we're not going to go into the land of Israel. Can you imagine this? They're going to say, this time we're going to get it right. This time we're going to give the report back to the Jewish people that it's not time. The time has not come to go into the land of Israel, to be redeemed. It's not the right time. So therefore, Moses has to bless him. He's the only one that gets the blessing because he's the only one in danger. He's the one in danger that he might feel that I don't want to make the mistake again of hastening the redemption, going too quickly in the land of Israel. I am going to be strict here. I'm going to be extra careful here and report, do not go into the land of Israel. Therefore Moses gives them the blessing. There we go, the two-edged sword. Also, in the book Achdut Yisrael, page 117, Rabbi Asiag says an amazing Torah. You know why God did not want to take the Jewish people the direct route to redeem them and bring them into the land of Israel? The direct route is going up from Egypt on the coast and just going straight from south to north, going right into the land of Israel. That's the easiest way to do it. Jewish people went in a roundabout 40-year route. Why did they not take this direct route? The Torah tells us, black and white, that the fact was that God was afraid that the Jewish people would see the bones and the remains of the tribe of Ephraim that were wiped out by the Philistines when they had left 30 years before the redemption. But the Rabbi Asiag adds light here, a tremendous light. He says, you know what? What was the fear? The real fear was not that they might be, oh my God, look at all these bones, and we're afraid now. It wasn't like a fear of the big bad Philistines that, are going to take us in a war. That wasn't the fear. The true fear was that if they would see the dead men of Ephraim, the bones strewn throughout the desert, you know what the conclusion they would come to? That just like the tribe of Ephraim made a mistake in calculations and left too early, we also left too early. They would come to the wrong conclusion. Now it is time for redemption. Now it is not time to delay. But there was the fear that if God would take them straight into the land of Israel, and they would go by the Philistine territories, and they would see the tribe of Ephraim, this would lead them to the wrong conclusion, that also by us it is not the right proper time. We must return to Egypt because apparently we're suffering here, we're being punished here, things aren't going as we expected. Things are really delayed here, and therefore the reason must be that we too miscalculated, and let's go back. Amazing. Okay, folks, we're going to have to call a timeout over here. With God's help, part 3, and hopefully the finale. Don't touch the dial. Same bad channel, same bad time. We'll be, God willing, with you next week for hopefully the finale.